During World War II, countries developed tanks with unique designs and cutting-edge technology to dominate the battlefield. These tanks were not just tools of war, but symbols of the power and innovation of a rapidly evolving military. Each tank has its own characteristics, ranging from armored toughness, lethal firepower, to impressive mobility in various battlefields. In this video, we explore the most iconic tanks in World War II history. During World War II, one of the most iconic combat vehicles of the Soviet Union was the T-34 medium tank. This tank was not only recognized as a symbol of Soviet military prowess, but was also considered one of the military technological innovations that changed the course of battle on the Eastern Front. On June 22, 1941, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion designed to crush the Soviet Union in a blitzkrieg. In the early phases of the operation, Wehrmacht forces managed to repulse the Soviet Red Army, which seemed unprepared for such a swift and devastating attack. However, behind the Germans' initial successes, there was one big surprise waiting for them: the T-34s and KVs that began to enter the battle. The presence of these combat vehicles psychologically shocked the German troops, who had initially expected to face a weaker and easily defeated opponent. At the time of the German invasion of Soviet territory, the Soviet Army had around 967 T-34 tanks. The Wehrmacht, accustomed to field dominance in previous invasions of Europe, had great difficulty in destroying the T-34s. One of the main reasons was the T-34's thick and sloping armor plating. Along with the thickness of the armor, the Germans quickly realized that their anti-tank guns were not strong enough to penetrate the T-34's defenses, overwhelming them on the battlefield. Equipped with the 76.2 mm F-34 main cannon, the T-34 was superior to any tank the Germans had at the time. Another important advantage of the T-34 was its relatively low production cost and fast production process. The Soviet Union managed to build a mass production line that allowed the tank to be produced in very large quantities. In this sense, the T-34's production speed was truly one of the decisive factors in the battle, where the Soviet Union was able to continuously renew and strengthen its armored forces. In all, more than 80,000 units of the T-34 in various variants were produced during the war, making it one of the most produced tanks in history. This made things even more dire for the Germans, as in 1944 the T-34-85 variant was introduced, which was equipped with a larger 85 mm cannon that made it much more effective than previous models. The combination of significant modifications to the T-34 and continued mass production gave the Soviet Union an unrivaled advantage on the battlefield. The M4 Sherman is one of the most iconic tanks in the history of World War II and became the backbone of the armored forces of the United States and other Western allies. The M4 Sherman's design, which was simple and efficient, allowed factories in the United States to produce it quickly and in large quantities. Between 1942 and 1945, more than 50,000 units of the M4 Sherman were produced, making it one of the most produced tanks in World War II history. The M4 Sherman was an evolution of the M3 tank. It was first produced in 1942, and it didn't take long for the Sherman to enter combat. The first few production runs of this tank were immediately deployed in combat in North Africa in 1943, where the Allies were engaged in an important campaign against Axis forces, including Germany and Italy. In these battles, the M4 Sherman demonstrated its effectiveness against German tanks, such as the Panzer Mark II and Mark IV. With its 75 mm main gun, capable of firing high explosive rounds at around 2,000 feet per second, the Sherman posed a serious threat to German light and medium tanks on the battlefield. While the Sherman was formidable against the Mark II and Mark IV Panzers, it began to show its limitations when faced with German heavy tanks, such as the Tiger and Panther. However, despite its disadvantages in terms of armament and protection, the M4 Sherman still gave the Allies an edge on the battlefield. The advantage lay not in the tank's individual strength, but in the large number of Shermans produced and strong logistical support. the United States and its allies were able to send a continuous supply of Shermans to the front lines, so that when Sherman tanks were destroyed, they could be quickly replaced by new units. The Sherman was also not limited to operating on the Western Front. Under the Lend-Lease program, the United States sent Sherman tanks to its allies, including the Soviet Union. Although the tank is more often associated with fighting on Europe's Western Front, the Sherman also played an important role on the Eastern Front. Sherman tanks sent to the Soviet Union helped strengthen the Red Army's armored forces against the Nazi invasion. The German Tiger I tank, officially known as Panzerkampfwagen 6 Tiger Aus E, is one of the most famous armored vehicles in military history. Introduced in 1942, the Tiger I was developed in response to Germany's need to create a heavy tank capable of matching the power of Soviet tanks such as the T-34 and KV-1, which had proven their superiority on the battlefield. The Tiger I was first deployed to the battlefield during the siege of Leningrad in 1942, under the auspices of the elite Waffen-SS unit. The siege was one of the most brutal battles of World War II, with German forces attempting to capture the city of Leningrad from the Soviet Red Army. The Tiger I presence on this front provided significant support to the German forces. With the firepower of its main cannon, the Tiger I was able to destroy enemy tanks from a great distance, making it a feared threat to the Soviet forces. Although the Tiger I was formidable against Soviet tanks, its first deployment suffered from problems such as transmission failure. The Tiger I design emphasized three main aspects: protection, firepower, and outstanding survivability. Equipped with an 88mm KWK-36 L56 main cannon, the Tiger I has a very lethal firepower. This made the Tiger I very effective against Allied tanks, such as the Sherman or T-34. In addition to its firepower, the Tiger I was also equipped with a very thick front armor plating, reaching 100mm. However, the Tiger I's superior firepower and protection did not come without a price. The production of this tank required enormous resources, both in terms of manpower and materials. This reliance on complex logistics also made the Tiger I an expensive tank to produce and maintain. As a result, only 1,347 Tiger I units were produced from 1942 to 1944, far fewer than the thousands produced by the Allies. One of the most interesting stories of Tiger I's silence is when Michael Wittmann fought in the Battle of Villers-Bocage on June 13, 1944. While commanding Tiger I tanks, Wittmann destroyed up to 14 tanks, 15 personnel carriers, and 2 anti-tank guns. The Panzerkampfwagen 5 Panther, better known as the Panther, is one of the most famous medium-class tanks used by Nazi Germany during World War II. It became an icon for the German military in the European theater. Production of the Panther began in December 1942, and from the start, the design was focused on creating a tank that had better armor protection, firepower, and mobility than previous medium tanks. One of the key elements of the Panther's design was the 80mm thick beveled armor plating on the front, which mimicked the design of the Soviet T-34. The thick armor made the U.S. realize that the 75mm M4 Sherman cannon could not penetrate the Panther from the front at all. In addition to its protection, the Panther is equipped with a 75mm KWK-42 L70 main cannon, which has a very high bullet velocity and firepower. This cannon had outstanding penetration capability against Allied tanks. The Panther was first deployed in large numbers at the Battle of Kursk in July 1943. Kursk was the first major test for the Panther, and although the Panther had tremendous potential, its battlefield debut did not go smoothly. Although in some cases the Panther demonstrated its superior ability to destroy Soviet armored vehicles from long distances, many Panther tanks were forced to be abandoned by their crews due to serious technical problems. Mechanical malfunctions, such as easily detached tracks, fragile transmissions, and engines that quickly overheated and caught fire, prevented many Panthers from being used in combat to their full potential. In addition, technical complexity and high production costs hindered mass production of the tank. although not as many as the Sherman or T-34, which reached tens of thousands of units. Around 6,000 Panthers were produced by the end of the war. The Panther continued to be used by German forces until the end of World War II, including in major battles such as the Battle of Normandy and eventually the Battle of Berlin. The IS-2 tank, one of the most feared heavy weapons used by the Red Army during World War II, first appeared on the battlefield in early 1944. The IS-2 was not only used for tank-on-tank combat, but also played an important role in supporting infantry. Its ability to destroy the enemy's toughest defenses, such as bunkers, well-defended buildings, and concealed weapons, made the IS-2 an invaluable weapon on the front lines. In early 1944, the IS-2 was first deployed in Ukraine, specifically in the operation to liberate the region from German occupation. During this operation, IS-2 tanks are claimed to have destroyed more than 40 German heavy tanks, including the Tiger and Elephant. This tank was a continuation of the KV tank program, but offered significant improvements in terms of armament and protection. Its development began in late 1942, with the initial IS-1 model using an 85mm cannon. However, after the Battle of Kursk, the cannon was deemed less effective against heavier German tanks, so the IS-2 was equipped with the 122mm D-25T cannon, which had exceptional firepower and was capable of destroying enemy tanks at long range. In addition to its lethal armament, the IS-2 was also known for its superior protection. The 120mm thick front armor plating provided excellent protection against German anti-tank guns. However, while the IS-2 was highly effective in combat, it also had some significant drawbacks. One of the main drawbacks was the cramped internal space. The tank commander had to handle multiple tasks at once, including giving command to the crew, directing cannon fire, and maintaining radio communications with other units. The production of the IS-2 was also a remarkable feat of Soviet industry during wartime. From 1943 to the end of the war, the Soviet Union managed to produce around 3,800 units of the IS-2,